Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast, and very excited about today's guest. He has a line on his website, Doug Cook RD. Well, I actually just spoiled the surprise. Obviously, our guest is Doug Cook RD today. His website is dougcookrd.com, and on that website, he has a statement which I want to share to get our show started today, and that's, I'm on a journey of revisiting most of what I've held to be true. Now, that is on the website of a registered dietitian, so you can imagine why I wanted to bring Doug on the show today. Doug, welcome to the show. How are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, so you are a registered dietitian who is on a journey of revisiting most of what you've held to be true. What's going on there?
Well, I got interested in nutrition when I was quite young, picking up books in bookstores, and I thought I knew what nutrition was, or I thought I had a personal philosophy of it, and decided to pursue it further. So I went to school and in university and got my degree, and then to become a dietitian, like in the U.S. and Canada, most people have to do a clinical internship in hospital, and there I found out, at least I thought I found out that everything I thought before going to school was wrong, and that I was there to learn what was truly right. And then now I'm starting to revisit all of that.
And what are you revisiting, and why?
So some of the tenets that are just held to be kind of in high regard through a traditional internship that's based on that kind of cliche Western medical model. I guess they call it mainstream medical model. Just the idea that, I'll be blunt. I mean, anybody who knows me knows my opinions, and that's the idea that, these institutions feel that they have all the facts and all the information, and if there was anything else to be found or to be known, they would know about it. And so I kind of fell into that mindset and thought that dietitians knew everything there was to know about nutrition. So some of the things that I'm just revisiting is this whole concept of saturated fats are not as evil as we once thought they were. The food guide or the food pyramid, or My Plate in the U.S. is highly political, and a lot of economic forces in play. A lot of those types of things. So it's just been a real journey in that regard.
Doug, what led you to question these things? Was it you were practicing the traditional method and it wasn't working for you? Was it research you conducted? What flipped the switch?
Well, it's just I've always been highly skeptical, I guess as a personality trait, and I'm a bit of a nerd. Left to my own devices, I'll just sit and read all day. So, regardless of whether or not I agreed with a person's philosophy or their ideas around health and nutrition, I subscribe to a lot of newsletters and pick up a lot of books and go to health food stores and pick up what is referred to as these alternative ideas, and just tried to keep an open mind. And then the more I read, of course, you get kind of defensive, and I kind of poo-hooed it, and eventually you have to start looking at the facts and be a little more objective and realize that there's a lot more out there than what I was exposed to.
And what would you say are the consequences you've seen in your clients for subscribing to this more mainstream fat kills you, protein is irrelevant, and carbohydrate from any source is really where it's at? What's the impact of that?
There's a lot of different consequences of that kind of approach. I mean, it's at the least offensive or the least impactful might just be, kind of some food myths or confusion, which may or may not be that benign, to all the way to the other spectrum where people are just are being fed perhaps information that isn't the best for them. So, one great example is this whole concept of omega-6 polyunsaturated fats. Going to school and in my internship, it was just pushing these grain and seed oils as much as possible in an attempt to lower LDL cholesterol. And, there's a lot of great research to show that it's not as inconsequential do these kinds of things. And a lot of the stuff that we preach, we really never had really good evidence for. So it can be as, benign as just, harmless and maybe some food myths to some real consequences that might have a negative impact, like pushing a lot of carbohydrate on people with diabetes type of thing is a simple example.
Well, speaking of consequences with a potentially negative impact, I can imagine that as an RD who is associated, you're a registered dietitian, you have continuing education credits, you have peers. I would imagine you're in the minority, because I know that that's the case for my RD counterparts or RD friends in the United States. So what do you do? How do you continue your education? How do you continue to swim upstream? It seems like it would be very tiring, to say the least.
Well, I'm known to, quote, be a rebel in that regard. I'm kind of known to not toe the party line. And I'm not sure I understood the question properly just because I perhaps wasn't listening, but how do I keep doing it? I keep at it. I keep following what I think is right. I can back it up with the research. I have no problem kind of going against the grain in that regard. I'm not legally bound to not to tell somebody that they can eat eggs or eat butter, that type of thing. At first, I have been sort of encountered resistance and naysayers, but I think there is a real shift overall. People are kind of being more open-minded, and the pendulum is swinging somewhat back. And for sure, social media and that kind of thing has an impact on that kind of dissemination of knowledge.
So what do you do? How do you handle when you might be in a conference or a continuing education environment, and the person who is speaking, the person who is supposedly in a position of authority, maybe preaching this classical mythology that through experience and through research to be false? What do you do?
What do I do in that moment, you mean, or how do I deal with it just kind of philosophically?
In that moment, is that hard? Do you just sit there and shake your head? Does your blood start to boil? Do you raise your hand and say, actually, the study, where is the study supporting what you're saying? What do you do?
Yeah, for sure my blood boils, and for sure I get angry, and I've certainly learned how to temper my passion, as it were. But you present counter arguments, you present the research, and I just kind of go from there. Working in a hospital, when I worked in a hospital, there's just no luck of changing mindsets in that regard. So I really did have to toe the party line. So I'm not working in that setting as much anymore, where I am restricted in that regard. So that's probably why I started my blog. It was just a bit of a rant, like many people. It's just a way to get your voice out in that sense. But the tide is turning, I think. So I'm hopeful.
And Doug, you have a unique ability. It seems you are very courageous, and you are very open and honest about your opinions. At the same time, you state on your website that there's many different perspectives to be considered in the field of nutrition, and that no one body of experts has all of the answers. And so what would you do, for example? We know you have a particular way of eating that's been very successful to you and that you often recommend. Let's say someone came into they wouldn't come into your office. Let's say you met someone on the street, and they said, I am a vegan, and I am vibrant, I am healthy, I feel great, I love it. What would you say to that person?
I would say, good for them. I would meet them where they are, as they say. There's, my goal as a nutrition counselor is to help people get the nutrients that they need. And I would, if they came to see me in private practice, I would still find out, where they are, what they're open to talking about, presenting one or two points that might be room for discussion. But when it comes to that kind of behavior change and that kind of stuff, you really have to meet people where they are, work with that position, and go from there. So I'm certainly not trying to change people per se, but to work with them and present my arguments. If you get into the realm of discussion where it's philosophical and dogma, then it becomes a bit of a lost cause. But there's always a starting point with which you can connect with.
I love that. And Doug, what are your thoughts on? A lot of people have had a lot of success with eating a higher fat diet. And often when people talk about eating higher fat diets, there is an assumption that is a animal product heavy diet. But it seems like one could easily eat 50-60% of their calories from plant fats if they wanted to. I mean, there's a lot of healthy, delicious plant fats, are there not?
Yeah, there's tons. There's nuts, seeds, avocados. We're drawing a blank here, but yeah, there's no problem getting a lot of fat from plants. I have no problem with people eating a lot of high-fat foods. I've certainly done my homework. I've tried every diet out there. So I've fared quite well with a higher fat diet myself, but I'm an omnivore in that sense. But yeah, there's no problem getting fat and eating lower carb on a plant-based diet if that's where somebody is or that's their choice.
I always think it's so interesting how many layers there are to things. The reason I ask that question is so often, for example, the idea of eating avoiding animal products and eating low fat are conflated, because you could avoid animal products and eat plenty of healthy fats, and you could eat a lot of animal products and not eat much fat at all. So how do you there's just like a lot of conflation that goes on, and you mix, like you said, dogma and almost ideological beliefs with science and practicality. How do you find with your clients the best way to unpack all that stuff is?
Context for me is everything, but you really have to find out what people are talking about when they come in with a particular viewpoint or approach. Like a perfect example for me is the whole concept of vegetarianism. I don't know what that means. So you really have to find a common language, common definition, and work from there. And for sure, context is everything. Most people have kind of compartmentalize these nutrition messages in these little like black and white statements, or just these little sound bites taken out of context, and they really don't know what it means. And a lot of times people don't even have a real sense of what they're doing. They might be eating a particular way, and they're eating in a completely different manner. So yeah, I think it really needs to, you have to kind of lay it out and be absolutely clear on what you're talking about.
I love that. And Doug, do you think, I mean, as an RD, I know becoming an RD is not an easy process, very, very rigorous. And are there still RDs out there? Because you talk about on your website, you describe it very well. You say nutrient-dense, whole foods that are as close to the earth as possible, minimally processed with loads of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. It's a very succinct, wonderful statement. So if I go to a registered dietitian and I say I'm going to eat some avocado or some coconut, and it's a nutrient-dense whole food that is very close to the earth, Are there still dietitians on this planet that would say, you'd probably be better off eating a 100-calorie snack pack of some Chips Ahoy cookies because you'll save yourself some calories?
Of course. I would say, I'm going to go on a limb and say the majority of people are still thinking that way. I thought that way. I know why they're thinking that way. I think if I can make a generalization, this is my own interpretation of the history of dietetics, is it's come from a great history of home economics, making food, dealing with real food, traditional foods, and I think somewhere along the line they probably wanted to become more legitimized. I'm not sure, but there was kind of a bit of an alignment with the medical model. And then we kind of lost our way where, I guess there was this reductionist approach, and everything just kind of focused on the three macronutrients: protein, fat, carbohydrate, calories, and then sodium kind of got into the play. And I think nowadays, because, if people eat relatively well and they're following the food guide or My Plate and they're not suffering from an overt clinical deficiency, we assume that diet's done its job, and there's really not much more than that diet can do. And, people dutifully look at the nutrition facts table and looking at calories, protein, fat, carbs, fiber, sodium, and they're just not paying attention to the quality, kind of getting back to this whole idea of whole foods, nutrient-dense foods. But I am, as I said, hopeful. It is kind of starting to change. There is, I think, that kind of grassroots getting back to talking about real food. But yeah, for sure, people would demonize coconut or avocado and think that the little snack pack Oreos might be a better snack choice. So it's slow.
it's well, Doug, it blows my mind a little bit, especially the rate at which things change, because my parents recently came to visit, and I was, they saw the coconut in my house, is shredded coconut oil. Like, I'm all about coconut. I love coconut. And we started talking. We're like, it wasn't that long ago that there was that like big public outrage about movie theater popcorn being popped in coconut oil. I was like, was that coconut oil? They're like, yeah, that was coconut oil. And now it's like coconut oil is great for you. And it was literally like coconut oil used to be treated as we treat trans fats now. We're kind of like everyone thinks they're bad. And that's, in less than a decade or about a decade, that's done a complete 180 almost, it seems.
It has, and I guess my sense is that the quality of the coconut oil back then might have been a problem. Like, for sure there is processed or hydrogenated coconut oil because it's not 100% saturated. So I really think there were poor quality oils out there. I think there may have been an element of legitimacy to the concern, but I completely hear you. So, it was put up right up there with trans fats and cigarettes, and now, it's all the rage. But I still stress to people it really does have to be virgin coconut or an unrefined coconut or as pure as possible. But it is funny. But for sure, most dietitians are still afraid of coconuts. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Well, speaking of things to be afraid of, just getting inside the mind of a dietitian, there are things, you just kind of said almost in jest, individuals still recommending a 100-calorie snack pack because 100 calories is better than 200 calories. Like, it seems even at the most basic level, like, we just took a step back and you look at fat, protein, and carbohydrate, right? Like, fat, to be stored as fat in the body, is going to go through a different, probably simpler process than, for example, protein, which is a completely different thing. Like, it is like there is a chair and there is a chapstick. You can tell what I have in my room right now. Like, those are two totally different things. Like, fat and protein are totally different things. So how can people still think, especially if this is their job, that eating 500 calories of fat will do the same thing in the body, even from a turning into and being stored as energy, as 500 calories of protein? Like, it just seems at the most basic level, we have to understand that they can't be treated the same way because they're not the same thing.
Right, and I just want to kind of cover my butt and say that dietitians have great training. They're smart. They've got great critical analysis or thinking skills. The problem is their exposure to a lot of this other research is limited because they don't know where to look for it, et cetera. So I want to give, as they say, I'm probably too old to say this, props to dietitians. But we have been taught that calories are calories, right? So, but we're not bomb calorimeters. We don't incinerate food. So, we don't extract the same number of calories from celery or carrots as we do from, the same quantity of calories from butter. That concept, I think, is slowly gaining ground, but it was never questioned. I don't think we really thought about it. I'm not sure why. Never made sense to me until, 10 years later into my career. But you're absolutely right. They're not the same. They're not treated the same or used by the body in the same way. So it is like any kind of convention or belief. It's going to take a while to be accepted because, there's always that point where you, rather than accepting the new evidence or the facts, you kind of trying to distort it and shape it into that same mold. But eventually it can't be. I think we're well on our way. Slow, but it's for sure, I think, going to happen.
Well, that's good news, and I certainly appreciate the work that you do to help further that cause, and I will also second you and say props, to borrow your term, Doug. That is your term now, officially. Props to RDs, and even props to many of the individuals out there who are literally just doing what they've been taught, right? Like if I tell you that smoking is good for you and you spend 30 years smoking and you get lung cancer, are you really at fault? Well, no. So yeah, again, props there. And Doug, what's next for you on this crusade to help bring the modern science to the forefront?
I think it's just more of the same. I'm going to continue with my blog. I'm going to continue to work with various outlets and continue to write articles, work on books. I'm working with a publisher, working on some cookbook revisions and working as a nutrition consultant in that way, and slowly but surely kind of getting these little nuggets of nutritional wisdom out there.
Well, again, I so appreciate that, Doug. It's so important to have people inside making these changes. So kudos to you, and folks, please do support Doug in his efforts. You can learn more about him at dougcookrd.com. Doug, thank you again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, and please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Chat with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.